He's written a lot of books, Scissors, Paper, Rock. I always want to call it Rock, Paper, Scissors, but it's Scissors, Paper, Rock. And I felt so plugged into the culture recently when I heard that he was coming here to this. And I go home, and in my mailbox is Harper's magazine, and he's got the cover story on living a life of solitude. And I thought, well, I'm just really plugged into things, you know. His writing is really, if you don't know it, you should know it. And he's come from a long ways away, and we never knew for sure if he was coming or not. We're very, very happy that he is here. I'd like to welcome Fenton Johnson to make the first presentation.
Yes, sir. And I have to finish that story about Robert.
Oh, okay.
I'll ask your forgiveness in advance if I cough a little bit. I have this thing going on that gives me a dry throat, so that might have to happen. I'll start my remarks in a second, but I wonder if you do me a favor. It is, after all, Memorial Day weekend coming up, and I thought if you could call to mind someone who is not with us in the flesh these days. If you could call that person to mind for about 30 seconds, just for a moment of silence, someone who has made it possible for you to be here today, for this event to happen, that would be a nice way to introduce Memorial Day weekend. So take a moment and just think of somebody and bring that person's presence into the room. All right, thank you. Our numbers are tripled or quadrupled or even more so. It's a great thing to have one's greatest achievement in life be something that one really did nothing to make happen, which is to be Martha's youngest brother. But it brings me here today. I wanted to say, first of all, of course, thank you to the remarkable Sister Claire, to say thank you to James Spraggins and to Wendy Smith, who made it possible for me to be here this evening. It's a particular honor to be here with Wendell, whom I met in 1983, and I had an appointment with a doctor recently, and I said that I might be going to speak at an event with Wendell Berry, and he said, "Who's Wendell Berry?" And I said, "The fact that I do not have to define the word sustainability to you is largely responsible to Wendell Berry." And so it's a real honor to be up here with my friend at this fantastic event. I have to point out too how marvelous it was that when Sister Claire was speaking, the curtains rose and the sort of beautiful Washington County landscape rolled out behind her. I thought that was a sort of magical directorial moment. Let's not forget that Martha is the oldest of 9, Arthur the oldest of 8, so that's also something to bear in mind. I was searching for a place to begin these comments, and so I emailed Martha and Arthur's children, Nancy, Pat, Rose, Rebecca, and Steve, and their responses humbled me with their eloquence. I teach at what is supposed to be University of Arizona, prides itself on being one of the best creative writing programs in the country, and I can tell you that all 4 of the children wrote better than all of my graduate students wrote. And I looked at them and I mean, serious, and that is, of course, due to their parents reading and writing. So I couldn't do better than just to quote their responses to the requests that I gave. So that's what I'm going to say. Each of the children mentioned in some way their parents' evolution, from farming with chemicals, following the philosophy that it's our place to dominate and subdue the land, to what Steve called seeking the real meaning of farming. To paraphrase Steve's words, not just the everyday activities of farming, feeding, cutting hay, animal husbandry, but asking, how do I manage the land and its resources as God meant? How can I utilize the natural resources that have been provided and still be a successful farmer? This took courage, Steve wrote, as it was a different type of farm management than the neighbors in the farming community were accustomed to. With her characteristic dry wit, Nancy Pat wrote of the take-it-for-granted ways they once lived. Burning trash, driving cars that emitted so much exhaust we drove with the windows rolled up, Big K Cola. My parents' path of self-education, she wrote, offers a model of a way to avoid cynicism regarding the long, slow, multiple-step slog we have to take in order to create truly sustainable lifestyles as the norm as opposed to the exception. Rose wrote of how she witnessed a conversion in her father's relationship to the land, the actual soil. He deliberately embraced humility, she wrote, and re-emerged as a student of the soil, letting the land teach him instead of the previously conventional agribusiness approach of dominance and control of the soil, the land, and the animals. On one hand, it was a practical change in how he managed the farm, but on a deeper level, I felt it softened him as a person and made him much more available in his persona altogether, to humble himself, return to his roots, and become a student of nature in such a deliberate way. As for my mother, Rose continued, thinking of her writing the weekly column that's in the Springfield Sun, and her work for New Pioneers, she is a quietly passionate advocate of land stewardship. Her column was always politically savvy, sensitive to the context around her in central Kentucky, but in reality, from her byline each week, she was shouting at people to wake up and take control of the environmental treasures of Kentucky. I always admired her depth of vision and commitment to the Kentucky environment. She really inherited that from her parents, our mother and father, Nancy Lee Hubbard and Patrick Dean Johnson, and has stayed in place to demonstrate that commitment her whole life. Rebecca wrote of returning to Kentucky. She was living elsewhere, now lives in Louisville, for a Valentine's date with Arthur to attend the farm machinery show one weekend, and then a home preservation tour with my mother the next weekend. At the fair, she wrote, I have experienced a great humbling in listening to my dad's experience of talking about farming and my mother's great knowledge of the state and its resources. My humbling bowed to the accumulation of knowledge dented in hard and good years. The poet Marion Moore wrote of novelist Henry James that he possessed idealism willing to make sacrifices for its self-preservation. Isn't that a lovely phrase? Idealism willing to make sacrifices for its self-preservation. I think of our ancestors who worked for change that they didn't live to see, but that has made our lives better. In this context, in teaching, I like to bring up with my students Rachel Carson, who was the environmental writer who died not long after the publication of Silent Spring, which really initiated the environmentalist movement in some way, or Frederick Douglass, who was born a slave, escaped slavery, saw the passage of the 13th and 14th Amendment that liberated African Americans, and then saw the end of Reconstruction. And when he died, arguably, African Americans were in some ways in a position as bad or worse as they had been prior to the Civil War. But that doesn't negate for a moment the activism, his life of commitment to that cause. And I think that's what we have to bear in mind as we work for change, that we are working for something that is going to affect generations that come following our moving on from this world. I return to Nancy Pat's words. My parents' path of self-education, she wrote, offers a model of a way to avoid cynicism regarding the long, slow, multiple-step slog we have to make in order to create truly sustainable lifestyles as the norm rather than the exception. Evolution, self-education, conversion, humility. These words came up in each of the children's letters. That word humility is as good a place to conclude as I can come up with. Rose and Rebecca are invoking the great virtue that we, citizens of the empire at this particular moment, so often neglect. Martha and Arthur offer us a model of a life that they have made whole and round. It is, in fact, a marriage, in the best sense of the word, a green life. So congratulations to new pioneers. Congratulations to my beloved sister and brother-in-law on receiving the first New Pioneers Green Living Award.
I didn't know my life was going to be told in such detail. But, I want to congratulate Sister Claire on the 10th anniversary. It's been a long, hard struggle. I want to congratulate her for having the courage to stay with it, the perseverance, and the guts to carry it out when sometimes it wasn't so good. And appreciate her persistence and perseverance and hard work that she has put in. I want to thank the board members or whoever else was involved with our presentation for being the first Green, Martha and I being the first Green Award of Washington County. I don't know whether you want to call it green, sustainable, or what, but she mentioned the whole, and my occupation as a farmer is a whole. It has to be a whole to be sustainable and work. It has to be economically and environmentally friendly for generations to come. And that's part only of what New Pioneers is about. And the same philosophy pertains to any business or anything. It has to be sustainable for generations to come. Sometimes modern agriculture is not, I don't think, on the sustainable path as we might have it be. It's neither here nor there, but nature will always take its course, and nature will at last. Just like it did in February, and we had a little snowstorm, and they said, no, you're not going to have a New Pioneers celebration. But that was February, and this is the middle of May, and everything is green and growing and coming up. It's great. Oh, it's great. So nature knows best. As far as being sustainable on the farm, it's been a long journey. It's been a learning process, an educational process, a spiritual experience, as some of our children alluded to. It's all tied together to the whole. And sometimes corporate agriculture does not work for the whole except the bottom line of the dollar figure, and it has to have, we have to have that to sustain the land, the environment, the people that run it. It all goes together. I was going to tell you a little bit more about it, except most of it's already been said. I farm very conservatively. There's a lot of things, synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, that I do not need on my farm. When I look at and see my farm get better every year without the use of those, why do I need them? It's getting better. I can see the results. Nature will take care of a lot of things that we'll let it. But I say this because there's only 1% or less of the population growing the food that we are consuming in this country. A lot of you are not farmers, but I say, I know you're connected to the land. I have been connected to the land for many years, and as I grow older, I am more connected to the land and have more respect for the land and for what it will produce if we do not do it systemically. That's enough on that. The rest of it is just management and day-to-day things that that one has to do with producing the food and keeping it together. And that's again, I want to thank Sister Claire and New Pioneers and the board, whoever else was considered in this nomination. Here's Martha.
He is going to let me have some time. Gosh, Sister Claire, remember 10 years ago? It's hard to believe how much has happened and how well this has turned out. I am so impressed and amazed that you stuck it through and that we got this far and that we have this great group together. It's wonderful, really. And I have to give credit to the county and to the people here. And I have to say, James made fun of us packing the crowd here in the way we did. I would like all the Youngs and all the Johnsons to stand up, please. Stand up. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. But part of being green and sustainable is being part of a community and a family network that has roots in the land and that loves the land and the community and the place that they grew up in. And that is a great part of what we enjoy and why we wanted to be here. Arthur and I both met in Louisville. Couldn't wait to get out. And we've never regretted, never looked back on that. So I will tell you that I'm going to paraphrase Kermit the Frog and borrow from Jim Henson and say, it's not always easy being green. We've had a lot of struggles. We had to learn the hard way. We were like Sister Claire. We just about hit down to that last 2 pennies several times. But we managed to scrape through, and Dad changed his practices, and we learned how to do it with nature. And now what matters to us is not having the big tractors and the fertilizer and all that, but the dung beetles and the earthworms are success for us. And we're doing well out there on the farm, raising things in a green way. So I want to say appreciation of family and place and the place that you grew up in and loving the land is part of it. And if you need any more proof than that, all you have to do is look out this window and look at this scenery out here. I know that you all love it. It's what makes Kentucky great. You know, we love this place. And I know you all do too. So thank you very much.